As someone who plays an unhealthy amount of video games, I often get lost in the different worlds given to me as a player. Whether I'm in the footsteps of Joel and Ellie, overcoming GLaDOS' tests, or tearing down colossal scale monsters, I can easily lose myself for hours and hours immersed in these experiences. But the question that goes around a lot is, are these experiences art? At the base level, art is a way to express oneself in an attempt to convey a reaction or a series of emotions from people viewing and interacting with it. This ranges from the Neolithic era, where early humans would paint on cave walls to depict growing society and religion, to today, where we have lots of artistic media, including photography and film. In this video, I plan to explain why I think that video games are an art form, and one of the most important art forms of this generation. Games have several different, more traditional art forms that make them up. Take Ori and the Blind Forest for example, a game with a soundtrack that's nothing less than phenomenal. Cuphead is an example of this too, with its soundtrack being completely orchestral. Cuphead is also an example of a game using traditional pen and paper animation, each frame painstakingly drawn by hand, and then coloured digitally, much like animators who worked on old 30s animations. The sheer amount of artistic talent needed to make environments of masterpieces like The Last of Us so awe-inspiring, and to make character models look almost realistic without dipping into the uncanny valley takes just as much as any other form of art. In the game, all these forms of art come together to make the artistic media of games design. There's a specific scene in The Last of Us that proved to me how beautiful games could be. After fighting my way through countless sewers and enclosed buildings, eventually you walk up to the ledge of a building and see a wide open space filled with giraffes. I'll come back to this example later, but for now it shows the beauty in the environment art and models. I recently wrote a critique and titled it The Art of Game Mechanics. It's got me thinking about mechanics in games as a whole, and how I would consider them to be the newest form of art. If art is about invoking emotions, then game mechanics and gameplay are the way games do this. Going back to the example of The Last of Us that I brought up earlier, the reveal of the wide open area wouldn't have had nearly as much as an effect on me if I saw the scene on its own, but in the context of the game, after dredging through sewers and tight dark spaces, we get a first glimpse of the open world in about 3 hours of gameplay. This reveal gives us a moment of awe, and a time to de-stress from the previous hours of hiding from infected and humans that were hunting us down. The scene makes us feel safe, and shows us the beauty of the world that this game has made for us. The title that I talked about in my critique was probably the best recent example of this. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice's slow, tedious, and almost boring gameplay give you the feeling of determination, of overcoming obstacles that stand in the way of your goals, that no film or book can do, because you're physically doing it, not just spectating a character do it. The emotion that these games make players feel isn't any different to the emotions that the paintings of Vincent van Gogh or Leonardo da Vinci bring, or the emotions that are invoked with movies and photography. It's hard to call games like Pong and Pac-Man art in the sense that I talk about in this video, but my belief is that most older games like that, once built for arcades, were not intended to be art, but solely as entertainment and money grabbers used in arcades. We see more and more artistic expression in games nowadays, especially with the indie market. Games like Gone Home and Everyone's Gone to the Rapture don't really rely on excruciating difficulty and limited lives to make money, and can become more of an interactive visual novel, where to complete the game you must finish the story. Intent is a huge part in the are games art question. People usually don't argue with a painter if they say their work is art, so why should we argue with developers claiming that their game is art and is made as a way to express themselves? I'm not saying that only games with a story are art either. Games like Dark Souls, a game in which you completely miss the story aspect if you want to play the game, can be art in a way which shapes modern culture and even creates communities, which leads me nicely on to my next point. Throughout history, art has been a huge factor in shaping human culture. Games are just the modern version of this. Games can build and bring together communities. Take Dark Souls for example. The Dark Souls game franchise has built a small cult following behind it, building communities and bringing people together. The influence of Dark Souls on other medias is apparent. It used to be that a new game couldn't be released without being called the Dark Souls of blank, and now even Avengers Affinity War is being compared to it. There are other games like that of Undertale and Pokemon that do the same thing and bring communities together and let people make friendships that otherwise would not have happened. Movies can have the same effect. Think of the following that The Shining gathered, or Jurassic Park series, which both continue to influence culture, movies and other art forms to this day. As video games are getting more and more accessible and easier to create, they are solidifying themselves as an art form. They are important in our culture and make an easy and engageable way to convey messages and emotions to an audience. They are a wonderful way to teach and train children about being creative, about mental illnesses, and about the world in which they live in. There are many ways in which games can be used as an artistic outlet, whether it's through modelling, environment art, story and mechanics, and so much more. As the media develops, I hope that the public see them in the same way that they see all other forms of art, and appreciate how thought-provoking and beautiful that games can actually be. I hope that in the near future we can finally settle the answer to the question, are video games art? And the answer will be yes.